On October 26, 2006, a helicopter landed by a waterfall up a steep box canyon near Knight Inlet, 250 kilometers northwest of Vancouver. The pilot was to pick up two logging surveyors who had been dropped off earlier that day. He landed at the top of a 30-meter waterfall, and Interfor forest engineer Kevin Kenny climbed aboard. Kenny's colleague Bill Schulte began to board, but one of the chopper's skids slipped off the edge of the waterfall. The pilot took off. Schulte hung onto a skid dangling above the rocks far below. When the aircraft swung back over the top of the waterfall, Schulte let go. He fell about 5 meters, spraining his ankle. With Schulte's weight off the skid, the chopper rocketed upward and hit a tree. A rotor blade tore off and the helicopter crashed to the ground. The pilot was knocked out. Kenny had broken ribs and a bleeding head, but shut off the helicopter's gas line. He and Schulte pulled the pilot out. The man's head had struck the side of the chopper during the crash, and he had a serious head injury. He was babbling nonsense. The Canadian Forces Search and Rescue team from Comox took off into good weather in a Cormorant helicopter and Buffalo plane. They flew into a raging storm. The Cormorant's pilots navigated by radar up the narrow canyon, its rotors at times only meters from cliffs and trees. After they spotted a flashlight beam Schulte and Kenny aimed at the Cormorant, the crew lowered down SAR Tech Sergeant Kent Gulliford on a cable. But lowering Gulliford into a forest by winch proved difficult and dangerous.
Because of the diluted visibility and stuff, we sort of caught him up in the trees. And I'm assuming he was trying to maneuver his way out of the trees because I was able to get some slack on the cable. But then as I brought the cable back in, it got tight again. So I didn't want to pull too hard, worried about hurting him. And this went on until we finally saw him swing out of the trees.
Gulliford assessed the pilot and got him into the steel mesh rescue litter and had Agnew hoist him up. Then, because the Cormorant's fuel supply was perilously low, Gulliford decided to put Kenny and Schulte in the basket together. Agnew's hoisting work was aided by a control rope Gulliford was holding.
And the SAR Tech had the guideline attached to the cable to help me when I was lifting the pilot and the two loggers off.
But when it came time for Gulliford to be hoisted up, there was no one left on the ground to hold a guideline.
When I went back in to extract the SAR Tech, I had to do a lot of manhandling of the hook because that's where we realized we were no longer right over top of the SAR Tech. So as soon as I lifted him off his feet, he commenced a slight swing.
Getting the crash survivors in the Cormorant out was at least as challenging as flying in. Pilot Captain Sean Morris and co-pilot Captain Rob Mulholland backed the Cormorant out of the canyon, with the crew spotting out the window and feeding the pilots information about the location of trees and cliffs. Master Corporal Derek Agnew had been on his first mission without a supervisor.
Let's just say this was my christening in the fire, as we put it, because it was my first main rescue by myself. I had just become upgraded at this time, and I no longer had my flight instructor with me. I was by myself.
For their daring work, the search and rescue team in the Cormorant became the first Canadians to receive the Prince Philip Helicopter Rescue Award from Britain's Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators.